presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and powered by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Welcome to the podcast, where former San Antonio police officer, author, and pastor Tim Rupp walks you through real-life scenarios involving our police officers and digs into the depths of facts and opinions on each case. This is Cop Talk, and it starts now.
Hello and welcome to the Strong Blue Line's Cop Talk. I'm Tim Rupp in the Rev.FM studio in beautiful Idaho Falls. Here with me is station manager Gary Austin. Hello, Gary.
Hey, Tim Rupp.
Well, here we are, well into May now. May the 8th.
Uh-huh.
Boy, this year's going by quickly.
It sure is.
You realize next month we'll be halfway through this year.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Just doesn't seem right.
All the stuff going on, election year, everything. And next week is Police Week.
Yes.
Hey,
super excited.
Yeah, May 13th through the 18th. And in honor of National Police Week and the Strong Blue Line Foundation, Moose Ridge Coffee is having a special fundraising. They're going to donate a portions of their sales all that week, the 13th through the 18th, to the Strong Blue Line Foundation.
That is great.
It is. So please get by Moose Ridge Coffee. I always want to call that Blue Ridge. It should be Blue Ridge. Moose Ridge Coffee in the Snake River Landing. And go over there and say hi to Bo and Kim and support them and support the Strong Blue Line Foundation. Absolutely. Sherry and I will be there Friday and Saturday to say hello to people and to talk to people. So that looking forward to that. We got a special this week and next week. We got a special. We're going to feature a sermon I did a couple months ago.
Yes,
called "An Unworthy Warrior."
Looking forward to it.
So we'll have Unworthy Warrior Part 1 today.
Okay.
And that comes from Luke chapter 7, verses 1 through 10.
I like it.
But before we get to that, let's get to our Officer Down memorial page. I have Deputy Warden Joseph T. Clark, Illinois Department of Corrections, Illinois. End of watch Saturday, May 8th, 1864. So right at the end of the Civil War. Actually, the Civil War just ended. May of 1864, just ended.
That's right.
Deputy Warden Joseph Clark succumbed to wounds he suffered days earlier after being assaulted by a prison at the Joliet State Prison. Deputy Warden Clark and another guard were removing a prisoner, a convicted horse thief, from a cell when the prisoner struck Clark on the side of the head with a rock obtained from the quarry. The prisoner seized Clark's gun and fired several shots. Excuse me. He seized Clark's gun and fired several shots, but missed him. After regaining consciousness, Clark gained control of his weapon and shot the prisoner in his arm. Assistants arrived and placed the prisoner into custody. Clark suffered a severe cut to his head, but continued his duties at the prison. A number of days later, he experienced intense pain in the head and died suddenly. An autopsy determined that he had suffered a severe skull fracture during the assault. This guy broke his head with the rock, and he just kept on working.
Goodness.
Wow. This was 1864.
It's a warrior.
When men were men.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
On January of 1865, the prisoner was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. On July 27th, 1866, he was executed by hanging at the Will County Jail, becoming the first prisoner to be executed in the county. So, wow. That's all we have on him. We don't have anything else. No other information. Who do you have there, Gary?
This is Deputy Sheriff Brian Lamar Mahaffey. End of watch, Saturday, May 8th, 2010. Rockdale County Sheriff's Office out of Georgia. So Deputy Sheriff Brian Mahaffey and other deputies attempted to serve a warrant at a home, and shots were exchanged between the deputies and the suspect while several of the deputies were inside the home. So as the home was being searched, a rear bedroom closet had not been cleared. And as Deputy Mahaffey opened the closet to clear it, the man in the closet immediately began shooting. And so the Deputy Mahaffey was struck by one round below his vest, and the suspect, who was wanted for rape, aggravated assault, and kidnapping, was also shot and killed. Deputy Mahaffey was rushed to a local hospital but did not survive. So he was 28, and he had just celebrated his 28th birthday the previous day.
Wow.
but he served with the Rockdale County Sheriff's Office for nearly 5 years. So another young officer, young deputy.
Wow.
So
keep our officers in prayer out there. They're always dealing with stuff. Even guys in prison. We saw that thing in Boise, and we'll talk about that a couple months ago. That was a crazy deal.
It really was.
So we're gonna have to talk about that on an upcoming show.
And it is one of those things, Tim, that you can't prepare. It's just impossible to prepare for every single situation or train for things. And so it's
a dangerous profession.
Keep them in prayer for sure.
Yeah, please do. Hey, you can catch Archive Cop Talk on Amazon, Google, Apple, and Spotify platforms. Well, Gary, let's get that sermon fired up.
Okay.
Open up your Bibles, if you will, please, this morning to Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7, New Testament, third gospel, Matthew, Mark, and then Luke. Luke chapter 7, find your way there, and that's where the text will be from this morning. Luke chapter 7. There are some in America who disparage, demean, and disrespect law enforcement officers. Most Americans do not. Most people in our country respect our officers and, in fact, sing accolades to them. A verse commonly associated with our police is John 15:13, where Jesus said, "Greater love has no one than this, than someone lay down his life for his friends." Across the country, there are monuments that honor the more than 26,000 officers who have died in the line of duty. President Kennedy designated the second week of May as Police Memorial Week to remember our fallen officers. It's quite common for people to personally express their thanks for officers. January 9th is Police Appreciation Day. Grade school children often express their thanks by coloring pictures for officers. These are all good things. In fact, these are biblical. The Apostle John said to give honor to whom honor is due. And to be honest, speaking as a retired officer, we tend to hold ourselves in high regard. We often think pretty highly of ourselves and our accomplishments. And that thinking has been the downfall of many officers. The truth be told, we're not all that people make us out to be. Like everyone else, we have our faults, and those faults haunt us. It was the famed detective Harry Callahan in Magnum Force who said, "A man has got to know his limitations." The title of today's sermon is An Unworthy Warrior. An Unworthy Warrior. Law enforcement officers and military members respect seasoned warriors, those who have been there and live with the scars. Warriors know the value of listening to advice from veteran warriors, and you and I would do well to lend an ear. We meet such a warrior in Luke chapter 7. He teaches us 4 important principles to live by. Please stand with me as we read God's word this morning. Luke chapter 7, beginning at verse 1, hear the word of the Lord. After he finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue." And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof." This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. The story in today's text took place in the 1st century AD in the region of Galilee. Galilee is where the northern kingdom of Israel once stood. However, it fell 8 centuries earlier to Syria. In the 1st century, Rome ruled the world. It was about 50 years into the 200-year period known as the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. Augustus was Caesar, and peace was priority. Rome's political appointees were responsible to ensure the Pax Romana. To guarantee peace, Roman soldiers were stationed throughout the empire. These soldiers were under the command of centurions. Centurions were well-paid, battle-tested soldiers who served at a particular region at the government's pleasure. Hence, centurions and their soldiers policed Roman provinces, guaranteeing Roman peace. As the name implies, each centurion commanded 100 soldiers. This text is about one such centurion. As mentioned, this centurion teaches us 4 important principles to live by. The first is to know your limitations. Know your limitations. As Luke 7 opens, we find that Jesus had just finished preaching and ministering in Lower Galilee, and he returned to Capernaum. Look again at verse 1. After he had finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Capernaum was a local fishing town that was located on the Sea of Galilee's north shore. It's where Peter lived. Peter's house served as the northern headquarters, if you will, of Jesus' ministry. As was true of a town of any size, a centurion was stationed there. Capernaum was under the jurisdiction of Herod Antipas. He's the guy who executed John the Baptist, and he sought to do the same thing with Jesus. Hence, the centurion's boss was no friend of Jesus. In the next verse, we find a crisis. A servant was deathly ill. Look at verse 2. Now, a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. The first thing that we find out about this centurion is that he valued others, even a slave. Roman slavery could be very cruel. Slaves were often foreigners that had been taken captive in battle. Some were soldiers, and some were professional people, such as doctors and accountants. Under Roman law, slaves didn't have any legal rights and could be abused by their masters without any protection from the law. Generally, masters looked down upon their slaves, but this centurion was different. The text says that he highly valued his servant. He heard that Jesus was in town and immediately sent for him. Following accepted Jewish protocol regarding matters of vital importance, the centurion asked Jewish leadership to speak on his behalf. Look with me at verse 3. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. The centurion knew his limitations. He was realistic, and he knew he didn't have the skill to treat a serious medical condition. Now, there's little doubt that he had already consulted with physicians who told him that there was no hope for his servant. We too need to know our limitations. We need a realistic understanding of our capabilities and boundaries. We can't do everything. We can't fix every problem. We can't meet everyone's needs and expectations. Sometimes we need help. An experienced homicide detective once told me, you don't have to have all the answers, you just need to know the person who does. The person who has answers to life's questions is Jesus. The centurion knew that. His request was simple and direct. Come and heal. Obviously, Jesus' fame and miracle working had spread beyond Judaism. And when this man of means heard that Jesus was in town, he requested that Jesus heal his servant. Is there something you're dealing with that you can't fix? Asking another for help means that we must set aside our pride. One of the most difficult things for a warrior to do is to ask for help. Refusing to seek help is not a sign of confidence, it's a sign of weakness. It's humbling to ask for help. But when we realistically understand and accept our capabilities and limitations, asking for help is easier. Going hand in hand with knowing our limitations is not believing the accolades. Don't believe the accolades. Surprisingly, the Jewish leaders were more than willing to plead for the servant on the centurion's behalf. Remember, this Gentile Roman centurion represented the Roman government who ruled over the Jews. The Jews wanted their freedom. They wanted to be free to rule themselves. They were no fans of the Roman Empire. Yet these local Jewish leaders were more than anxious to help. Why? Why would they be more anxious to help this Gentile Roman centurion? Because the centurion was a good guy. The Jews went to Jesus and pleaded on the centurion's behalf, claiming that he was worthy for Jesus to grant his request. Look with me at verse 4. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy to have you do this for him." Why did they believe the centurion was worthy? Because he was patriotic, kind, he was patriotic, kind, and helpful. Continue on in verse 5. For he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue. The text says that he loves our nation. In other words, he had become Jewish by faith. There's no other explanation for the Jewish leadership to insist that Jesus grant the request. Further, the centurion invested his own personal funds into the community by building the synagogue for them. Like today, synagogues were local gathering places for Jews living outside of Jerusalem to worship. The centurion's action revealed a love for the Jewish people, their God, and a sacrificial commitment to worshiping Yahweh. Jesus agreed to go with them. Look at the first part of verse 6. And Jesus went with them. Now, did Jesus go because he felt the centurion was worthy? What does it mean to be worthy? How can one become worthy? Turn with me to Matthew chapter 5. Keep your place there, mark that place, but we're going to go over to Matthew chapter 5. Just turn to the left a couple books to the left. Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5 through 7 records the Sermon on the Mount. So these words are from the Sermon on the Mount. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says that unless a person's righteousness exceeds that of the most pious religious leaders, we're not worthy. Did you get that? Jesus said, we're going to read it, but Jesus said that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the most pious religious leaders, you're not worthy. Look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So what is the bar for righteousness? Look down in chapter 5 to verse 43. Matthew 5, starting at verse 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Now, this sounds a lot like the centurion. He was doing good deeds. He was doing good things for people. Yet Jesus raised the bar of righteousness. How high did Jesus raise the bar of righteousness? Look at verse 48. You therefore must be perfect. I want you to say that word. I'm going to read it again. You therefore must be perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect. Perfection? Are you kidding? No, Jesus was not kidding. He meant perfection. How? How can we be perfect? If you were to even live your life beginning today and never sinned again for the rest of your life, you would still fall short because you're not perfect. Thanks for listening in. If you have a topic or question you want to address on Cop Talk, please send me an email. You can email suggestions, questions, or comments, complaints to coptalk@therev.fm. That's coptalk@therev.fm. A thought from the good book today. For the Lord responds to him who loves as a father, the son whom he delights. Thank you for joining us and help us to make the thin blue line a strong blue line.
Cop Talk is presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and sponsored by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Questions and comments are always welcome by email to coptalk@therev.fm. Listen, follow, leave a review, and share this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or YouTube. And visit thestrongblueline.org to learn how you can be a supporter. Cop Talk is a Rev FM production, produced and edited by Gary Austin. Thank you for joining us on Cop Talk.